Pay attention to this video and listen to the voice.
Guide. Yeah.
Look at the figure in the background, way back on the Monon High Bridge, blue jacket and blue jeans. His name is Richard Allen, 45 years old, local pharmacy tech. To the town of Delphi, Indiana, he's nobody, just Rick, the guy behind the counter. But in minutes, his path will collide with two teenage girls. The girls are unaware of the shadow behind them. They're taking photos, sharing headphones, enjoying a warm February day off school. Abby Williams, 13 years old, quiet, artistic. Libby German, 14 years old, bold, always connected. At 2:13 p.m., Libby senses the danger. She pulls out her phone, she hits record. That 43-second recording, captured in a moment of pure bravery, will eventually dismantle Richard Allen's life. But first, he forces them off that bridge, down the hill and into the woods, where the world loses sight of them. February 13, 2017, at about 1:49 p.m., Libby's older sister, Kelsey, dropped them off at the trailhead. She watched them walk toward the bridge and waved goodbye.
When I dropped them off, it was just like any other time I dropped them off to go to the trails. I just said goodbye and told Libby I loved her and that I'd see her when I got home.
Just after 2 p.m., Libby posted a photo to Snapchat. Abby walking across the Monon High Bridge, tiny against the massive wooden structure, hands in pockets, watching her step. The bridge itself is a nightmare. 63 feet high, 850 feet of rotting track with missing wooden ties. You can see straight down to the creek below. Every step requires total focus. One wrong move and you're falling 6 stories to the ground. The girls were listening to music on shared headphones. They didn't notice the man behind them. Not yet. But in the metadata of that Snapchat photo, there's something chilling. Behind them, closing in fast, was Richard Allen. By the time Libby realized he was following them, they were already trapped. No quick escape, nowhere to run without risking a deadly fall. That man had been hunting on those trails for hours. At 12:30 p.m., 4 teenage girls passed him. He made them uncomfortable, the way he stared, the way he didn't acknowledge them when they said hello. Around 2 p.m., another witness saw him standing on the bridge, just standing there, waiting. Most victims don't see it coming, but Libby German did. Around 2:13 p.m., she made a decision that would change everything. She didn't just panic, she pulled out her phone and started recording. The full recording is 43 seconds long. You can hear him giving commands. This is the path, just go down there. His voice is calm, authoritative. At one point, investigators believe one of the girls said a single word, gun. He had a weapon, he had control, and he marched them off that bridge, down the hill, and into the woods where the world loses sight of them. February 14th, Valentine's Day, the search resumed at first light. Hundreds of volunteers combed every inch of the woods. Just before noon, 2 searchers were walking along Deer Creek, about half a mile upstream from the bridge. They saw something in the water, a piece of clothing. They looked up the bank, and there, about 50 feet from the creek, they found their bodies. The family was searching nearby. They heard the commotion. Becky Patty walked up to an officer. "Did you find them?" He couldn't even speak. He just looked down. We won't describe the graphic details of that scene, but it's important to understand what the perpetrator left behind. He didn't just end their lives. He staged the area. Clothing was found in the creek. There were no signs of a struggle in that specific spot, meaning he'd marched them at gunpoint. And right there, nestled in the dirt between the 2 girls, was his unspent .40 caliber cartridge. The individual had racked the slide of his gun, ejecting a live round, maybe to intimidate them, maybe the gun jammed, but he left his calling card in the mud. He walked out of those woods thinking he was a ghost. He didn't know that Libby's phone was lying there, hidden beneath the leaves. A day after the bodies were found, police released a critical piece of evidence. They had the perpetrator on video. They released the grainy image Libby had taken. A man in a blue jacket and blue jeans walking on the bridge. Then they released the audio. Specific voice. Calm.
Guys,
Authoritative.
ยัง没有
Police were confident. With a photo and a voice, someone in this small town had to recognize him. In July 2017, police released a sketch. Older man, maybe 40s or 50s, goatee, flat cap. Tips flooded in, thousands of them, but nothing stuck. No solid leads, no arrests. Then, in April 2019, police did something unusual. They scrapped the first sketch entirely, released a completely different one. Younger man, maybe 18 to 40, curly hair, clean-shaven. They said this second sketch was actually drawn days after the murder, but hadn't been released for 2 years. It was now their primary suspect. The public was confused. Was the killer 50? Was he 20? The investigation stalled. Detectives were buried in paperwork, chasing shadows. Meanwhile, the man in the video didn't run, didn't flee the state. He went to work. Richard Allen lived 5 minutes from the bridge, worked as a pharmacy tech at the local CVS. He filled prescriptions. He printed photos. He chatted with customers. Some of those customers were the families of the girls. Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother, she'd come into that CVS regularly. She'd hand Richard Allen her film, ask him to develop photos of Libby, memorial photos, funeral photos. And he'd develop them, smile, hand them back, have a nice day. Becky said later that he did it with no remorse. Richard Allen hid in plain sight for 5 years. He went to local bars, played pool. To everyone in Delphi, he was just Rick, the quiet guy at the pharmacy. Nobody connected him to the figure on the bridge. His wife Kathy stood by him. She worked at the same CVS right alongside him. After the murders, she'd see the missing posters. She'd hear the town gossip. She'd watch the news coverage. And then she'd go home to Richard Allen, the man who'd done it. Did she suspect? Did she notice anything different about him on February 13th when he came home? According to later testimony, she said he seemed normal, maybe a little quiet, but nothing alarming. Friends and neighbors described Allen as ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of guy you'd pass on the street and forget immediately. That ordinariness was his camouflage. In a small town hunting for a monster, nobody was looking at the guy ringing up their prescriptions. But the reason he wasn't caught wasn't because he covered his tracks. It was because of a filing error. In the days after the murder, Richard Allen actually went to the police. He met with a conservation officer named Dan Doolin in a grocery store parking lot. He told the officer he'd been on the trails that day, said he was on the bridge between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m., said he was wearing a blue jacket and jeans. He placed himself at the scene, during the time of the murder, wearing the exact clothes in the video. That tip should have made him suspect number 1 immediately. But the conservation officer wasn't a homicide detective. The report got filed away. Allen's last name was recorded incorrectly in the system. The tip was marked as cleared. For 5 years, Richard Allen lived free because a piece of paper was in the wrong stack. The case went cold. Leads dried up. The family waited. Until September 2022. September 21, 2022. A volunteer clerk named Kathy Schenk was tasked with digitizing old case files. She pulled a piece of paper from a box that hadn't been touched in years. It was the report from Conservation Officer Dan Doolin from 2017. Richard Allen states he was on the bridge from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Investigators froze. The crime happened during that exact window. They looked up Richard Allen, still living in the same house, still working at CVS. They'd let their prime suspect walk free for 2,000 days. On October 13, 2022, police raided Richard Allen's home. In his closet, they found a blue jacket, identical to the one in Libby's video. But the most damning piece of evidence was hidden in a box, a Sig Sauer P226.40 caliber pistol. They sent it to the lab. Ballistics experts test-fired it. They compared the extractor marks on the test casings to the unspent round found between the girls 5 years earlier. It matched. That bullet had been cycled through Richard Allen's gun. Richard Allen was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. At first, he denied everything, said he didn't do it.
I'm not going to say I did something I didn't do. I'm not.
Yeah.
And I know you know me, and I know you know that I would never do this.
But once he was in custody, things changed. Richard Allen's behavior became erratic. His defense team said he was innocent, said he was being framed. But Richard Allen told a different story. In recorded jailhouse phone calls to his wife Kathy, he broke down. His voice was clear. I did it. I killed Abby and Libby. His wife didn't want to hear it. She begged him to stop talking, but he kept going. He confessed to his mother. He confessed to the prison warden. He confessed to a prison psychologist named Dr. Monica Walla.
Well, I need to tell you something anyway.
Okay. Are you sure you want to talk to me over the phone?
I think I have to.
Okay.
I need you to know that I did this.
What? No.
Over the course of his incarceration, Richard Allen confessed more than 60 times. And here's what makes those confessions so devastating. They weren't generic. They weren't vague admissions of guilt. They were detailed, specific, haunting. He told Dr. Walla about his state of mind that day, said he'd been drinking, said he went to the trails with a plan. He described following the girls across the bridge, said he pulled out his gun to control them, told them to go down the hill. Those exact words captured on Libby's phone. He described marching them through the woods to the spot where their bodies would later be found. And he told Dr. Wallace something that nobody outside the investigation knew. He'd intended to assault them. But he got spooked. He said he saw a van driving past and panicked. Investigators checked. A witness named Brad Weber had driven past that area in his van around 2:30 p.m., the exact time Allen said he was there. This wasn't public knowledge. Nobody knew about the van except investigators and the killer. Allen also confessed to the method. He said he used a box cutter, not the gun. The gun was just for control. He told Dr. Walla, I made sure they were dead so they wouldn't suffer. Autopsy reports matched his confession. The wounds were consistent with a box cutter, not a firearm. At one point, Allen wrote out a full confession on a piece of paper in his cell. When guards came to collect it as evidence, he grabbed it back and ate it. His lawyers argued these confessions were the product of mental breakdown. They said Allen had developed psychosis from being held in solitary confinement, that he was on suicide watch, that he'd deteriorated so badly he was eating his own waste. They claimed the confessions were unreliable, coerced by isolation. But prosecutors had a different view. To them, this sounded like a conscience finally clearing itself. The trial began in October 2024, one of the most anticipated legal battles in Indiana history. And Richard Allen's defense didn't just argue reasonable doubt, they went for something much stranger. They argued that Allen was innocent, that the girls' deaths were the result of a pagan cult practicing Odinism. They pointed to sticks placed on the bodies at the crime scene, said they were arranged in the pattern of Odin's cross, a Norse religious symbol. They even implicated local men with Norse tattoos, suggesting they were part of a ritual sacrifice. But Judge Frances Gull blocked the theory from being presented to the jury. She ruled there wasn't enough evidence to support it. The defense was furious. They claimed their client was being railroaded. The prosecution didn't need conspiracy theories. They relied on evidence. A bullet traced to Richard Allen's gun found between the bodies, dozens of confessions containing details only the killer would know, Libby's video, witnesses who placed him on the trails, and the blue jacket hanging in his closet. But they also had something else, something the defense couldn't explain away. A woman named Sarah Carbaugh testified she'd been driving on County Road 300 North around 3:57 p.m. on February 13th. She saw a man walking along the road, muddy and bloody, matching the description of bridge guy perfectly: blue jacket, jeans. When investigators showed her Richard Allen's photo years later, she confirmed it. The timeline was perfect. Evidence from Libby's phone suggests the murders took place shortly after 2:30 p.m. A short time later, around 3:57 p.m., a witness saw a man fitting the suspect's description walking away from the bridge area toward a nearby road. The defense tried to discredit her, said her memory was unreliable after so many years, but she was certain she'd never forgotten that man's face. They had everything. After 4 days of deliberation, 19 hours total, the jury reached a verdict. It wasn't an open and shut case. They struggled. The confessions were disturbing, but the defense had raised questions about Allen's mental state. The bullet evidence was strong, but was it enough? On November 11, 2024, the jury returned. Richard Allen stood as the courtroom fell silent. The verdict was read.
Breaking news right now out of Indiana. The man convicted of the Delphi murders case has been sentenced to 130 years in prison, which is the maximum punishment for his crime.
4 counts, 4 convictions, 4 times the word guilty landed in that room. The families wore friendship bracelets that said Abby and Libby. Some cried, some sat in silence. After 7 years, they finally had an answer. A month later, the judge sentenced Richard Allen to 130 years in prison. Justice took 7 years. It did not come from a breakthrough or a sudden confession. It began with Libby German. When the man approached them on the bridge, he appeared calm and in control. Investigators later determined that he had been following the girls. Libby recognized the situation as dangerous. She stayed close to her friend and activated the video function on her phone. The recording captured his voice. It captured his appearance. It documented his presence on the trail. The investigation that followed was long and uneven. Public sketches changed. A tip was overlooked. For years, the case remained unresolved. But the recording remained. When investigators returned to the evidence, it became central to identifying and prosecuting the man responsible. Richard Allen was later convicted of the murders of Abigail Williams and Libby German. Abby and Libby did not deserve what happened that day. Their deaths were the result of a violent crime. But the evidence Libby recorded ensured the man who followed them onto the bridge would eventually be identified, convicted, and sentenced to prison for the rest of his life.